Hello, everybody. It's your boy Sil coming to you with another session recap. This is for the city campaign, the week of Thursday, November 20th, I believe. Uh, this video should be relatively short, as while we had a very full session, it was mostly downtime activities. So, while our players were taking a rest and their characters were getting some work done, we all get to enjoy a relatively brief sort of video as I just run down what happened. Um, Reconnecting after the last uh, session, they discussed with Ohm, the halfling crime boss, what had happened uh, after the fight with the mayor and Sin, and how that resolved with that strange figure appearing and stealing the blades before they all passed into unconsciousness. Um, and upon exiting their facility where they were taken care of, um, because they'd been out for several weeks, they noticed that the area where the judicial building had been, that 3 mile long circle in the center of the city, was now a lake of dark black and blue water, of that pure mountain water that runs down the river. At which point they went about their way, and I had informed the players that they would have a bit of downtime. And around this time, they learned that there would be about 8 months worth of downtime. So we went with midnight first. In order, I'm just gonna sort of tell you what happened. Midnight went back to the circus, found everyone there, had returned with the evacuees, confused and concerned when he informed them that his store was dead, but he didn't go into much detail. Rummaging through his store's personal belongings, he found several daggers, the pile of circus coin that they'd earned over the year worth of travel, which he, of course, distributed out to them to let them use as they needed fit. He found more iconography relating to that odd card, the Joker symbol, as well as a letter which was written in Undercommon, I believe. It was either Undercommon or Elvish. Elvish, I think it was. Um, and he went to Daria with the letter, and went to Levy as well, who Levy is a linguist and has a great many different languages at her disposal. But they discovered that while it was written in Elvish, or Undercommon, I don't quite remember, um, it was written in code. So the words didn't really make any sense. They didn't really form structures. It was just the language, but the purpose was escaping them. And he received a bit of a cryptic warning from Daria about trusting Ohm. After which he did go to Ohm and asked him. Well, he went to Levy first and had Levy contact his siblings. He found out that they are okay. They're glad to hear that he is fine, but they are in Warden. Uh, Levy didn't ask if they were in the city of Warden or on the section of land known as Warden. Um, but that's still quite a distance away, even by boat. So the idea of them coming to visit him in a quick time is difficult, since Warden's almost a year's travel away. And then deciding that Midnight wanted to look into his parents a bit more, he went to Ohm and asked if Ohm could get a hold of them for him or try to look for them. And Ohm took a bit of information from him and sent Ulster, his Hound Archon, to converse with Midnight's siblings to find them in Warden and get more information. The last thing he did, beyond handing over Reichiji, the dagger, to Coop, was go to Grulach Thren to finally get his silk leather, this dark, majestic drow silk that he acquired in Wharf, made into a suit of armor. And Grulach offered him a hefty discount, but it was still a little too much money, so he ended up borrowing over 300 gold from Levy, who was sitting on a stockpile of money that she had never spent from when they had agreed to euthanize the king's wife, of the king's mother, from Worf. So he got his armor made, which ended up becoming this sort of drow silk studded leather armor, which was studded with green dragon scales, making it much sturdier than regular studded leather armor. As well, it gave him the ability to, once per day each, tap into the supernatural abilities of the Dark Elves to cast darkness or fairy fire, as well as making him a lot harder to see if he's in darkness and not directly in light. Next, let's go over what Levy was doing, since we talked about Levy quite a bit. Levy spent a bit of money buying some diamonds, and looking into Zahn's scar. They noticed that the scar had changed quite a bit, but it had reverted to its original size, and it didn't feel cursed or anything. So Levy felt quite good about that. And that was about it. Levy spent a lot of her time working and helping her friends with sending spells. Siren, the druid, um, spent a little bit of time in the agricultural district using plant growth. Uh, and once the month sort of spilled out of winter and into spring, as this downtime would take them all the way through the next 2 months of winter and all 4 months of spring, he used plant growth to sort of help aid and recoup the food supplies for the city. And then he decided he was going to go on expeditions into the wild to try and discover new animals to acquire for his wild shape. Um, at which point he realized he had like no money, but wanted to hire some men at arms, some assistants. And at first he decided he would go alone, go hunting, use his druidic nature of the wild to take down some big game, some bears, some deer, rabbits, quail, anything, and sell it to taverns for food in the city, make enough coin to hire help. And we decided that if he would just give the food to the people he was hiring, then he could cut out the middleman and basically just pay them in trade. Um, Give them a whole elk he takes down, they get food for their families for a week, and they, just make sure he's alive while he's out hunting. So Siren and his three boys, Alistair, Nigel, and uh, Arvin. My notes are really bad, and it's very hard to read his name. Um, they spent several weeks out in the forest, and they actually ran into Levy. Levy did one more thing, which for some reason I scratched out. Um, they ended up finding three new wild shapes: Pachycephalosaurus, uh, Parasaurus, and Velociraptor. So three very varied dinosaur forms, which Siren considered a pretty big success. And he and his men at arms, his paid help, ended up becoming pretty close friends. During this time, Levy did sneak into the forest to try and keep an eye on her clan to see if they were still waylaying people. And she spent a few days sort of hiding on the outskirts of the village and didn't notice them doing anything like that. But she did notice that a lot of the people who were originally in the temple, the priests, and the commander of the military, the people who they normally wouldn't see, as well as the abominations, uh, were there, and they didn't seem to be leaving. Like, for some reason, the temple had been evacuated. Beyond this, Kovalin, our deep gnome, who was new to the city, wasn't able to quite speak with Darling like they wanted, and decided not to go bother Cinderia. They spent a lot of time training. They reconnected with the guild, the trades guild within the city, meeting Guildmaster Roderick, and asked if they could try and receive additional training with their jeweler's kit. And they ended up getting connected with a dragonborn named Kura. And they spent several weeks working with Kura after sending a message to making sure that they got everything sorted. Kovalin looked into becoming a trained enchanter, and tried going to the library to do some research, but the library when they went was in need of repair, basically, from the war. and they didn't really go back later because they were spending so much time with their jewels. In our session, and in our campaign, I've made different rules for crafting magical items, and you basically need to acquire enchanter training. You need to spend a bit of downtime and receive training to learn how to properly, permanently infuse magic into items. And it cost, I believe, the cost was 250 gold. I want to say, but I don't have my homebrew stuff up for that in front of me. And that was a little too rich for Covalent, so instead they spent most of their time working on their jewels with Kura and gained quite a bit of skill out of that. Beyond this, Darnik, who was feeling very sick and wasn't really able to talk, so we didn't get to really flush out what they were doing. But they spent most of their time working with Ohm after several, we won't say failed, but hilarious romantic attempts with Zhaan. Darnik spent most of their time working for Ohm. Um, they'd become a bit of one of his enforcers. Not quite in the higher echelon yet, but definitely someone that Ohm trusted. Spent most of his time just taking down looters, people who were trying to break into abandoned homes that were still being cleared out by the city, or were taking advantage of the chaos of the returning evacuees to commit crimes, murder, theft, arson. Uh, so Darnik sort of became an enforcer, taking care of those people for Ohm, and just sort of patrolling specific areas for him, or doing other things. He didn't have Darnik doing anything that illegal yet, but the two worked together quite well. He earned quite a bit of money, as well as earned the nickname Mr. Blue from Bob, the large ogre that Ohm uses as a bodyguard to his tunnel system, as well as earning his own private room in the tunnel system below. Beyond Darnik, Kovalin, Siren, Levy, that leaves us with two more players. Coop, Zhaan, the artist who made this beautiful piece. Please check them out on Instagram. I'll hopefully have a link for that in the description below. Zhaan had a rough time. Um, During the battle with Sin, the Basilisk had hatched, and Zhaan had discovered that the Basilisk was born, and that for the 3 weeks, Grulok, who was recovering from his own injuries, had been taking care of it. Um, Zhaan worked together with Levy to get a hold of Solomon, the dwarf who had rescued Zhaan earlier, a known exotic animal breeder and trainer. Um, However, they failed the DC to convince him that he should come right away. Uh, and so he offered to come in a few months, and they asked for tips and tricks about how to properly train it. And he basically explained that if you're not the first thing it sees when it hatches, it takes a bit longer to train it because it sort of bonds with that initial thing. It'll still try to kill you, but less. And basically, he explains how you need to train the Basilisk, only to use its eye gaze on command, and to break its habit of using it as a reflex or when it's hungry or feels threatened. Um, and Zhaan discovered that this would probably take most of their downtime. So very slowly and regretfully, they asked Grulok if he'd like to keep the Basilisk. And Grulok's kind of a softie for little critters, even a basilisk, so he took it. Which means I'm quite upset. So upset that Zhaan ended up getting a cat named Neela and buying a little blue ribbon. Zhaan did a little bit of research into the lady that had pulled its way out of his chest and discovered that by all records they could find, it was probably Lilith, the drow goddess, the goddess of chaos, queen of the abyss. They didn't find out too much more, but they did question their mother about it, and it led to a rather interesting conversation. Um, because Lilith had mentioned something about Zahn's father, and though his mother, didn't offer very much details, Zahn learned a little bit more about the fact that his adopted mother, uh, one, seemed to have known his father, and two had a decent idea about the relationship between his biological father and mother and them. Uh, to which Zhaan slowly realized, wait, I have a biological mother. Is she dead? And that was never resolved, as they never asked. Zhaan also spent about 2 weeks, half a month, 3 weeks, give or take, studying the scroll they acquired from Velaz Balrose, and acquiring a new martial technique, the entry beginnings of the Way of the Emerald Presence, a homebrew monk order that was originally founded by a green dragon and taught to elves in a swampland to the south. Um, and it gave Coop the ability now that when successfully landing a unarmed strike, Coop could pour their key into their target to wound their inside like a poison. Uh, and Coop Zahn tried to convince their mother to buy a tavern or open a business, with all that platinum that Zahn had given her. And she was kind of hesitant because it's already a lot of work just maintaining her own small stuff that she does on the side for money, as well as keeping up with her son, who's in a wheelchair. And her son, who's a bit more savvy than Zahn, was like, why don't we just buy a business and just own the business and just hire the people we bought it from to keep running it and just collect money? Which was more his mother's speed, and they jumped on that. Um, Rickle, the paladin, left at the end of the last session. He left the group. The player didn't want to play that character anymore, and instead he made a new character, Valinor, a elven or a half elf, elven. I think he's either a high elf or a half elf, um, a wizard, and he came to the city to train under Kizengulp, the Master of the Broken Tower, a called-in favor between his elven father and Kizengulp, who is the son of a man that Valinor's father was very close with. And though Kizengulp didn't feel any particular reason to um, pay off his father's debt like this, he also didn't mind. But Valinor, after realizing he wasn't going to be receiving constant training from Kizengulp, and it was more of a he's just giving you a place to stay kind of deal, got quite upset, and at one point, like, sort of had a bit of a selfish tantrum, uh, through which teleported the pair of them thousands of miles away into the frozen wastes and promptly showed off the power of Power Word Kill against a Remoraz before teleporting them back. And Valinor realized that while Kizengulp might not be teaching him directly, he's not making him leave or not pay attention to him. So Valinor began to pay more attention to Kizengulp and spent most of his time helping him. So much so that he actually uh, caught a little bit of enchanter training, and Kizengulp, when the downtime was over, uh, the one religious player in the group, Levy, the cleric, noticed that things were starting to feel odd. And when she went to prepare her spells for the day, she realized it took about an hour of praying and thinking of what she wanted to do for the day or what she wanted to prepare. Whereas normally she could wake up and just think and feel that divine energy fill her. And it gave her a sort of lethargic exhaustion to prepare her spells. And apparently this had been happening to most other people for a while. The religious casters within the city, which has a name, by the way, it's called Koth Show now, which was always the name of the place, but not a name anyone ever knew or used. Levy, it had been bothering Ohm. Apparently, the few members of the council, which involves 3 religious spellcasters at least at any given time, currently Sindaria, the mother, and Cersei, the speaker of the dead, um, all religious casters, all had this sudden ennui come over them. And Ohm was getting very antsy that no one in the religious district was talking to him about why. So he wanted to get people he trusted to look into the matter. And Kizengulp, because if there's one person in the city you could trust to be interested in figuring out what's screwing with religious fanatics, but from a perspective of someone who doesn't care, Kizengulp would be his man. Um, so he had Darnik go and gather the group and come to him. And Kizengulp informed Valinor that he should go in his stead, and in return, beyond just getting some more in-field experience with whatever Ohm wanted, should Valinor return alive, Kizengulp would finish his training on enchanting for half the price and half the time, since he'd already picked up bits and pieces, to which Valinor was like intrigued. So we left off with them all coming to Ohm to see what was going on and what Ohm wanted done. And that's where we're going to pick up next session. I hope people are excited. If you have any questions about the downtime, you feel free to ask, and we'll go into it. And we'll see you all with the next D&D recap. Peace.